AITA for refusing to split half of the check for dinner with my best friend like we usually do. Then she wanted me to apologize and pay the full amount of the check as a token of my apology. I have known Vanessa since we were kids. She has been my best friend since the 2nd grade, and through all the ups and downs of life, we have remained by each other's side. We have celebrated each other's victories, supported each other through the hard times, and shared some of the best moments of our lives together. Our friendship has always been built on mutual respect and understanding, which is why what happened recently still sits so uncomfortably with me. We always split the check in half. It was something we agreed upon years ago, and it was Vanessa who initially suggested it. It made things easier, no complicated calculations, no awkward discussions about who owed what, and no concerns about making things difficult for the server. I agreed to it without a second thought. At the time, it made sense. The thing is, I am not a big eater. I have always been the kind of person who orders something light, maybe a small entree, sometimes even just an appetizer and a drink. Vanessa, on the other hand, has always had a much bigger appetite. She enjoys food, and when we go out, she tends to order multiple dishes, drinks, and sometimes even dessert. Over the years, I have noticed that what I was consuming usually amounted to around 15 to 35% of the total bill, while she was ordering 65 to 85%. But since we were splitting the check equally, I was paying way more than my fair share every time. Sometimes it was just an extra $10 or $20, which I could brush off, but more often than not, I was paying $50 to $100 more than what I actually consumed. It was my older sister, Bianca, who pointed it out to me a few weeks ago. She couldn't believe that I had been splitting the bill like this for years, especially since I was consistently paying for way more than I ordered. She told me it was ridiculous, unfair, and that I should start paying only for what I ordered. Her words stuck with me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much money I had been losing over time. It wasn't that I couldn't afford it. I make around $90,000 a year between multiple jobs, including dog training, where I charge $80 to $100 an hour, but it was the principle of it. Why should I keep overpaying when there was no real reason to? A few weeks after that conversation, Vanessa got a huge promotion at work. She had been working incredibly hard for it, and when she finally got the news, she was over the moon. To celebrate, she suggested we go to this fine dining restaurant she had been dying to try. I was happy for her and excited to celebrate, so I agreed without hesitation. When we arrived at the restaurant, I decided that this was the moment I was going to set a boundary. Before we placed our orders, I casually told Vanessa that I wanted to pay for only the food that I ordered from now on. She simply said, "Okay," and I thought that was the end of it. I assumed she understood where I was coming from. She ordered a lot of food. She always did, but this time, she really went all out. She got an appetizer, a main course, 2 additional sides, a dessert, and multiple drinks. Meanwhile, I ordered 1 main dish, a single cocktail, and a side. The meal itself was great, and for the most part, we enjoyed our time together. But then the check came. I pulled out my card and calculated my portion, covering exactly what I had ordered, which was around $145. That was when Vanessa looked at me, confused, and asked if I was actually being serious. I told her yes, of course I was. That was when her face dropped. She told me she thought I was joking. When I asked why she would think that, she said it was because we had been splitting the check for so long that she just assumed I wasn't serious about changing the arrangement. Then she looked down at the bill and, with a bitter laugh, said that if she had known I was serious, she wouldn't have ordered so much. I didn't really know what to say to that. I told her I was just tired of constantly paying so much more than I should be and that, over time, it had added up to a ridiculous amount. I said I had no problem treating her now and then, but it didn't feel fair to always pay $50 to $100 extra every single time we went out. That was when her entire demeanor changed. She looked at me with this mixture of disappointment and frustration and said, "So you just decided to be a bitch and pull this stunt on the day of my big promotion?" Then she grabbed her card, paid for her portion of the bill, and stormed out of the restaurant without another word. That would have been bad enough on its own, but she was also the one who had driven us there. Since she left me stranded, I had to call an Uber, which cost me $36 just to get back home. When I woke up the next morning, My phone was flooded with messages from our mutual friends, calling me a cheapskate and telling me I was an awful friend for pulling this on the day of her promotion. It was as if everyone had already chosen her side without even asking for my perspective. They acted like I had humiliated her in some way when all I did was ask to pay for my own food. I don't think I did anything wrong. I wasn't trying to make a statement, and I certainly wasn't trying to ruin her night. I just wanted to stop overpaying. I understand that the timing could have been better, but at the same time, when was I supposed to bring it up? If I had mentioned it after the fact, she probably would have been even angrier. If I had brought it up before we even got to the restaurant, she might have accused me of not wanting to celebrate with her at all. At the end of the day, I feel like I set a reasonable boundary, but now I am being painted as the villain. So I can't help but wonder, was I in the wrong? Update 1. A few weeks had passed since that disastrous night at the fine dining restaurant, and the silence between Vanessa and me was louder than any argument we could have had. I wasn't used to it. For as long as I could remember, she had been a constant in my life. There was never a time when we would go more than a few days without at least a text or a quick check-in. But now, nothing. It felt strange, unsettling, even. A friendship that had lasted years, that had weathered childhood, high school, college, and everything in between, now stood in limbo over something as simple as splitting a check. Or maybe it wasn't simple. Maybe that was just the final thread in a fabric that had been unraveling for longer than I had wanted to admit. Still, I refused to be the one to reach out first. I had done nothing wrong. I wasn't going to chase after her, wasn't going to beg for things to go back to how they were when how they were had always left me at a disadvantage. If she wanted to hold a grudge because I was no longer willing to subsidize her meals, then so be it. It wasn't about the money, it never had been. It was about the entitlement, the expectation, the way she had made me feel ridiculous for wanting something as basic as fairness. Then, out of nowhere, she called me. I almost didn't answer. The moment I saw her name flashing on my screen, my stomach clenched with hesitation. I wasn't sure if I was ready to deal with whatever this conversation would bring. Would she be defensive? Would she pretend like nothing had happened? Would she try to guilt me again? For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, debating whether I should just let it ring out. But curiosity won in the end. I took a breath, steeled myself, and picked up. The second I heard her voice, I knew something was different. There was something unfamiliar in her tone, a hesitance, a slight uncertainty I had almost never heard from her before. Vanessa had always been confident, always sure of herself in a way that could be both admirable and frustrating. But now, there was a pause between her words, a quiet discomfort that felt entirely foreign coming from her. She apologized. And for the first time since this whole thing started, it actually sounded real. It wasn't laced with passive aggression, wasn't wrapped in excuses or justifications. She admitted that she had overreacted that night, that she let her emotions get the best of her, that she had no right to treat me the way she did. She said she hadn't really thought about it before, hadn't realized how much it had been piling up on my end. And for the first time, I felt like she actually meant it. A part of me had started to believe that our friendship was beyond repair, that this fight had exposed something too fundamental to ignore. But in that moment, it felt like we were on the same page again, like she was finally seeing what I had been feeling for so long. She told me she wanted to make things right, that she didn't want things to be weird between us. She suggested we meet up for dinner, somewhere more casual this time, to talk, to clear the air once and for all. I agreed. It felt like a step in the right direction, a chance to put everything behind us and move forward. That night, when I arrived at the restaurant, she was already there, waiting at the table. The moment she saw me, she smiled, warm, familiar, as if nothing had ever been wrong between us. The tension that had once lingered in the air was gone, replaced by an easy familiarity that I hadn't realized I had missed. We fell into our old rhythm easily, slipping back into the kind of effortless conversation that had always defined our friendship. We laughed about the dumb things we did as kids, reminisced about our favorite moments together, talked about the little things we had missed in each other's lives over the past few weeks. It felt good. It felt right. For the first time since the incident, I genuinely believed that everything was going to be okay. We both ordered our own meals, which seemed like an unspoken acknowledgement that she finally understood why I had wanted to start paying separately in the first place. There was no awkwardness about it, no tension when we placed our orders. I let out a quiet breath of relief. This was it. The resolution I had been hoping for. We were back to normal, and I was finally able to let my guard down. Then the check arrived. The waiter placed it neatly between us, and I reached for my wallet without a second thought. But then Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable, and casually said, "Well, since I've already apologized, it's your turn. I think it would be fair if you paid for both of us, it would be your gesture of reconciliation." I froze. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The words felt so out of place, so calculated, that my brain struggled to process them. My stomach twisted slightly as I tried to gauge whether she was joking. But when I looked at her, there was no hint of amusement on her face. She was completely serious. Something in my chest tightened. I blinked, trying to mask my shock, trying to find some logic in what she had just said. I told her that she was the one who got the promotion, so if anything, it would make more sense for her to pay. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw the shift in her expression. Her voice dropped in temperature, her gaze sharp as she said, "Are you serious?" She stared at me as if I had just insulted her, as if I had crossed some unspoken boundary that I hadn't even known existed. Then she said it, the thing that made everything click into place. "I apologized first. Now you have to show that you're sorry too." And that was when I understood. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about making amends. This was a test, a power play disguised as an olive branch. In her mind, apologies weren't about understanding or mutual respect. They were transactions, something to be exchanged, something that required repayment. She hadn't apologized because she truly understood where I was coming from. She had apologized because she expected something in return. And that was when I realized there was no point in arguing. She had not changed. In the end, I silently took out my card and paid the entire bill. Update 2. A week passed after that dinner with Vanessa, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had let something slip through my fingers. Paying the bill that night had left a bitter taste in my mouth, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented. It wasn't just about covering the cost of 2 meals, it was about the unspoken power dynamic that had been at play between us for years. That moment, that dinner, was supposed to be a fresh start, an acknowledgement that things needed to change, but instead, I had let her take control of the situation once again. She had twisted the concept of reconciliation into something transactional, using her apology as leverage to make me feel obligated, to make me prove my own remorse through financial sacrifice. It wasn't about fairness to her. It never had been. It was about maintaining the invisible balance she had come to expect, one where she always came out ahead, and I absorbed the extra weight without complaint. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just one isolated incident. It was a pattern that had existed for so long I had stopped recognizing it for what it was. For years, I had been the one making concessions, the one ensuring our friendship ran smoothly, the one biting my tongue when I felt like I was being taken advantage of. And the worst part? She never even had to ask. She had created an expectation so deeply ingrained that it had become second nature, to both of us. I had allowed it to continue, had played my role willingly, had convinced myself that this was just how things were, that it wasn't worth causing tension over a few extra dollars here and there. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. I decided to act. The idea formed slowly, piece by piece, until it was no longer just a passing thought but a firm decision. I invited Vanessa to dinner again, choosing a restaurant that was nice but not extravagant, something comfortable, neutral, a place where the focus would be on the conversation rather than the setting. But this time, I wasn't going alone. I asked Bianca to come with me. I didn't tell Vanessa in advance. There was no need. I wanted her reaction to be unfiltered, raw, without the safety net of preparation or excuses. When we arrived, Vanessa's reaction was immediate. Surprise flickered across her face, her smile tightening just slightly as she greeted me and then turned to Bianca with a chuckle that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, you didn't say Bianca would be here," she muttered, her voice light, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Her eyes darted between the two of us, trying to assess the situation, to figure out whether this was just a casual outing or something else entirely. I shrugged as casually as I could, keeping my expression neutral. She wanted to see us. Vanessa hesitated for just a second before letting out a small laugh, nodding as she slid into her seat. Bianca said nothing, just gave her a polite but firm nod before settling in across from her. The dinner itself played out smoothly, on the surface, at least. We ate, drank, and talked about neutral, safe topics. Work, upcoming plans, mutual friends. Vanessa acted as if nothing had happened, as if that uncomfortable night at the fine dining restaurant had never taken place, as if she had never guilt-tripped me into paying for her meal under the guise of an apology. She smiled, laughed at the right moments, carried herself with the ease of someone who had already decided the past was irrelevant. And I played along. I let the conversation flow, let her believe that everything was fine, let her think that I had moved on, that I had accepted the way things were and had no interest in disrupting them. But all the while, I was waiting. Then the check arrived. The waiter placed it neatly between us, the soft rustling of the receipt against the tablecloth somehow louder than it should have been. There was a moment of stillness, barely a second, but I saw it, the flicker of expectation in Vanessa's expression, the way her shoulders relaxed ever so slightly, as if she already knew how this would go. She moved first, leaned back in her chair with an air of practiced ease, her voice casual, almost careless, as she said, "So, we'll split it, as usual?" There it was. The assumption. The entitlement. The complete disregard for everything that had happened. No hesitation, no second-guessing, just the automatic expectation that we were back to normal, that things had reset in her favor, that the balance had tipped once again to where she wanted it. I had barely opened my mouth when Bianca spoke first. "Wait." Her voice was calm, steady, but there was something in her tone that made Vanessa pause mid-motion. Bianca wasn't joking. She wasn't leaving room for discussion. "Are you serious? You know Emily said she wouldn't do it again. You made her pay for both of you last time, right? And now you want to split it again?" Vanessa blinked, clearly caught off guard. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely surprised, as if she hadn't even considered that her words would be challenged. Her confusion was written all over her face, her brows pulling together as she struggled to make sense of what was happening. "Well, it's a habit," she started, her voice trailing off when Bianca cut her off without missing a beat. "It's a habit for you, because she always overpaid. But that's enough. Everyone pays for themselves, as agreed." Something shifted in Vanessa's expression. It was subtle, but I saw it. The way her jaw tensed slightly, the way her lips parted as if to argue, to explain, to spin the situation into something more favorable for her. But then she hesitated. She looked at Bianca, then at me, and I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. There was no way around it this time. Bianca wasn't like me, she wouldn't bend, wouldn't let things slide for the sake of keeping the peace. She wasn't afraid of confrontation, wasn't worried about preserving some delicate balance that only served one side. And Vanessa knew it. There was a beat of silence, the weight of the moment settling between us like a thick fog. Then, finally, Vanessa exhaled, her expression carefully neutral as she muttered, "Okay, okay. Everyone pays for themselves." Update 3. A few days passed after that dinner, and I found myself constantly replaying the moment in my head, Vanessa's hesitation, the way her expression shifted when she realized she wouldn't get her way, the quiet frustration barely hidden behind her casual agreement to finally pay for her own meal. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, nor was it relief. It was something more complicated, something tangled between disappointment and inevitability. This had been coming for a long time. For the first time in years, I had set a boundary and enforced it. And the moment someone other than me, someone firm, unwavering, held her accountable, she had no choice but to accept it. There had been no argument, no excuse, just reluctant compliance. And then there was silence. Vanessa didn't text me after that night. No check-ins, no memes, no casual, "How's your day?" messages that used to be a part of our routine. I wasn't sure whether she was sulking or genuinely processing what had happened. Either way, I decided not to be the one to reach out first. Then, out of nowhere, her name popped up on my screen. It was late in the evening, and I had been curled up on my couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when the notification appeared. For a moment, I just stared at it, debating whether I even wanted to open the message. Part of me expected another passive-aggressive remark, another attempt to twist the situation into something that made her the victim. But curiosity got the better of me, and I tapped on it. She was apologizing. It wasn't overly long, nor was it dramatic. There were no justifications, no backhanded excuses, just a simple acknowledgement that she had acted poorly, that she had been unfair to me, and that she hadn't realized how much her behavior had been affecting me until she was forced to confront it head-on. She admitted that she had gotten too comfortable with the way things were, that she hadn't considered how frustrating it must have been for me to constantly overpay while she benefited. She said she missed me. I read the message a few times before responding. Our conversation started cautiously, like walking on thin ice, both of us unsure whether the surface would hold or crack beneath our weight. But slowly, as the messages flowed back and forth, the tension eased. We talked about small things first, things that had nothing to do with the fight. She told me about work, about how overwhelming her new position had been but also how rewarding. I told her about a new client I had taken on for dog training, a stubborn but sweet husky that had a habit of escaping every leash it was put in. The conversation drifted, meandering between topics like it used to. It felt normal, but at the same time, there was something different in the undercurrent, an unspoken acknowledgement that we had crossed a line in our friendship, that things had shifted, and that while we were talking again, things wouldn't be exactly the same. Then she joked about it. At first, I wasn't sure if it was meant to be a light-hearted comment or a veiled complaint, but she asked me, almost playfully, not to bring Bianca along to dinners anymore. She said it with laughing emojis, as if that softened the weight of the request. I could practically hear her voice in my head, half amused, half serious. I let the message sit for a moment before replying. I told her that Bianca had only said what I had been too hesitant to say for years, that her presence wasn't the problem had been Vanessa's unwillingness to listen when it was just me standing my ground. I didn't say it with malice, didn't phrase it in a way that would restart the argument, but I made sure my point was clear. She took a little longer to respond to that one. When she did, she didn't argue. She just acknowledged it. There was still work to be done between us. The trust that had been quietly eroded over the years by small, seemingly insignificant moments didn't just rebuild overnight. But at the very least, we were talking. There was an effort. And that, for now, was enough.